my name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, then welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be my March 2024 reading wrap-up. March was a slower reading month for me. I fell into a reading slump about a week into it, but we do have some books to talk about today despite that, including some books that I read during a readathon, which is always fun. I will have the content warnings for all the books I talk about today that I can find, linked down below in the description, and let's go ahead and get into it. And first up are volumes 2, 3, and 4 of Whisper Me a Love Song by Takeshima. Whisper Me a Love Song follows our main character Himari, who falls in love with her upperclassman after hearing her band perform on the first day of school. She confesses, and then this girl confesses her love back, and then Himari realizes that they are feeling two different kinds of love and begins to wonder what love really means. This series is just getting better and better for me with every volume. And volume 3 was where things took a turn from this is a series that I really like to this is a series that I love. And that love only grew stronger with volume 4. I already love Yori from the very beginning, but Himari is really starting to come to life for me, and I feel like I'm understanding her character a lot better. The romance is really fun and sweet and wholesome, and the band drama is also really good. And there are just exciting things happening within the story, and I'm excited to keep going and see more of the characters, which just makes my heart very happy, and the series as a whole just makes me very happy. Next up is volume 11 of Jujutsu Kaisen by Gege Akutami. Jujutsu Kaisen follows our main character Itadori, who spends his days with the occult club and visiting his hospitalized grandfather. However, he soon gets exposed to the world of curses when he unknowingly encounters a cursed item, of which he ends up swallowing. This item ends up being the finger of the king of curses, and with these newfound powers the finger gives him, Itadori is enrolled in the Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High School, where he begins his journey of becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer. We're still in the Shibuya arc here, and it's amazing, and that's pretty much all I have for that. There are some parts of this arc that I would love to just never experience again, and I'm going to get there. I'll get there eventually. I just need to find the courage within me to do it. Next up is Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. Family Lore follows one of our main characters who is able to predict a day that people will die when she decides that she wants a living wake that will hopefully bring her family and her community together. This book takes place in the span of 3 days prior to that wake and traces the lives and the history of the women in this family. I kind of wish that I listened to this book on audio instead of reading it physically. And part of that is because of the reading slump that I mentioned earlier, but I also do feel like hearing somebody actually speak these characters' voices would have gotten me into this a lot more. And this book is very much about these characters telling their stories, past and present, and I like that a lot, and when it worked for me, it really worked. But this book has a handful of different point of views, and there were definitely point of views that I preferred more than others, and that I got into and invested in more than others. I also did like the pacing of this book. My reading slump did not always like it, but I really appreciate the way the author was able to weave everything together, from the past to the present to the different characters and just what each of them had going on. And this book definitely does have some really compelling concepts and storylines in here. Again, I thought some of them were more compelling than others, and overall it's not my favorite book from this author, but I am glad that I read it, and I gave Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo 3.75 out of 5 stars. Next up is the first of 2 poetry collections that I read in March, and that is RIFQA by Mohammed El-Kurd. I read this one as an ebook, and there were just so many incredible, powerful, and heartbreaking poems and lines in here, with just so many lines that made me have to stop reading for a second just to fully appreciate what I had just read and let that feeling settle over me. And I love the way that the poems called back to one another and referenced each other. I haven't been reading a ton of poetry lately, I think it's been a couple of years, which does make me sad, but this collection was just a perfect way to return to that. And that is going to bring us to the readathon, specifically the trans rights readathon, which I will have links to down below in the description. I loved this readathon last year. I loved it again this year. I think it's a great way to get book recommendations and just learn about a ton of wonderful organizations, among other things as well. So yeah, links will be down below in the description if you want to check them out. And then also down the description will be links to the 2 organizations that I personally donated to this year. And the first book that I finished during this readathon is actually another poetry collection that I read as an ebook, and that is is Blood Orange by Mix Yaffa. This was also very good. And just like with RIFQA, the author has a really powerful voice, and you could really just feel all of their emotions within every single word. Like, this one wasn't a long read at all, but there were just so many poems and so many lines that are really going to stick with me. Next up is Chef's Choice by TJ Alexander. Chef's Choice follows our main character who lives a good life in New York City, from her roommate to just her being a proud trans woman, which are all things that she tries to remind herself of after she gets fired from her office job and needs to find a new way to pay her bills. Which is where our other main character comes in. He is a trans man and also the heir to a culinary empire, and in order to inherit said culinary empire, there are a couple of things that he needs to accomplish. The first is to get a girlfriend, and then the second is to learn a series of world-renowned and often elaborate family recipes. I listened to this one on audiobook, and just first and foremost, I loved our main character Luna, and just her entire personality. Like, she was by far my favorite part of this book, and also just one of my favorite characters that I've read so far this year. I also really enjoyed the whole cooking storyline. There were some really fun moments that came from this, but this book also just does have a handful of really fun moments. There were some really cute friendship moments, for example, and it's just one of those books that when you see the characters thrive, you just get happy for them. And I will say that while I loved reading a T for T romance throughout the entire book, I didn't really get into these two specifically as a couple until towards the end. Like, I was happy for them and rooting for them the entire time, but that was mostly from a neutral standpoint until the end when I started to feel things. This is also very much a romance novel, and it really does hit a lot of those tropes, including in this case the fake dating trope. And again, I was more neutral about a lot of these things when in the past I feel like I have been more into them, but it was still a good time, and I'll definitely be listening to Chef's Kiss, which is the first book in this series, at some point. For now though, I will be giving Chef's Choice by TJ Alexander 3.75 out of 5 stars. So this is where the readathon technically ended, but a lot of people extended their readathon until the 31st for TikTok-a-thon and then also International Trans Day of Visibility, and I did get my third read done for this readathon during that time period, even though I did read most of it during the actual week of the readathon. And that book is Infinity Alchemist by Kacen Callender. Infinity Alchemist follows our main character Ash, who gets rejected from the Lancaster College of Alchemic Science, which means that he cannot legally study alchemy. So he gets a job as the groundskeeper and keeps learning alchemy in secret. He ends up getting caught by an apprentice, and instead of having him arrested, she decides to make a deal with him that she will keep his secret if he helps her find the sacred book of Source, which will give its reader extraordinary power. In my heart, this book is a 5-star. Just from the way that I got so completely lost in the world and the story and the characters, to the extent that I didn't even remember my reading slump, because my brain was just here and filled with this, and it kept that level of investment from me the entire time. I also just really loved a lot of the characters and the romance, and especially the storyline itself. So that all definitely helped too, but it was when I wasn't reading this book and my mind would drift back to it, I would start to notice some questions that I had, specifically when it comes to the magic system, but not always. It also went into the world building territory a little bit, and I wish that this book just dove deeper into some things in those areas, because it did feel very surface level to me at times, especially for the magic system, which all worked fine when I wasn't thinking about it, and it was for sure ignorable enough for like 90% of my actual reading experience. But when I wasn't reading it, and especially looking back on this book now, it's just unfortunately not as ignorable anymore. So I ended up giving Infinity Alchemist by Kacen Callender 4.75 out of 5 stars. And finally, we do have some more manga to talk about, starting with Shadow Eliminators by Kento Amemiya. And Shadow Eliminators follows a high school student who has a very strong sense of justice that gets turned upside down and tested when he gets exposed to otherworldly beings. I read chapters 5 through 16 of this in March, which means that I am officially caught up to this series. And it's one that I had some mixed feelings about when I first started it, because I liked the art style and like some of the comedic timing, but it also felt messy and confusing at times, and then just so Shonen Jump as well. But going into March, I was still very curious about this series because it did have more positives than negatives for me. So I kept reading, and eventually we did dive into what felt like its first big arc. And I'm not gonna lie, when everything started to get revealed and we gained a ton of new characters and information almost all at once, I thought they lost me here. Like, there were a couple of chapters where I was like, if Shonen Jump cancels this next week, I wouldn't be surprised, because it was just moving that fast fast and there was just so much coming at me. But then things cleared up, and that's when things started to get good for me again. I do like a lot of the characters that they introduced, and I do think that they are going in some interesting directions. And it was also just really cool to see the surface of this series stripped away into the deeper reality of who they are and who they are going to be. It's not perfect. Some of the humor doesn't really land for me, which towards the beginning of this series, that was one of the things that I was excited about, but it kind of feels like they're trying a little bit too hard on occasion, and it can still feel messy. I do have some concerns about the pacing based off of those couple of chapters that I mentioned earlier, but I do feel like it's coming together, and if it gets the chance, I feel like I may grow to really like this series. But at the same time, I feel like come next week or the week after, or just in a few chapters, I might turn on it again. So there's still like a 3-star for me overall right now. I don't fully trust them yet, but I am hesitantly optimistic about it right now. Next up are the other series that I've been keeping up with over on the Shonen Jump and Manga Plus apps, including chapters 50 to 52 of You and I Are Polar Opposites, chapter 104 of Kaiju number 8, chapters 5 and 6 of Kaiju number 8 B-side, chapters 23 through 27 of Kagurabachi, Akane Banashi chapters 100 to 104, and then also Blue Box chapters 139 to 143. And I feel like this is the first month since I've been talking about these series on my channel where I don't really feel like I have a standout favorite between them, because they were all just really good this month. Like, I feel like You and I Are Polar Opposites may have my heart a little bit more, but I have no complaints here. I felt equally into all of them and what they all have going on, and there were just some really good chapters here for sure. Okay, so that is everything that I read in March, and also all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer the question that'll be around here if you want to do that, and hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye!